would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to the middle of yet another week, folks. Happy to have you along for the ride. Hopefully you're getting the most out of your week. Best way to reach me, try the website. TheRebelBroker.com is the address. You can click on the menu item titled Contact. And from there, you can send me any ideas, suggestions, observations, or questions that you might have. So feel free to do that. And while you're there, why not go to the very top of the page, click the big red button that says Take the Survey to support the show. Give the same email address both times you're asked. Answer a handful of questions. You'll not only be supporting the show, but you'll also be putting yourself in a drawing for a $50 Amazon gift card, which we will be giving out very soon. Welcome to the first day of March, by the way. That's right. We've ushered in a brand new month today. So, of course, we will usher in yet another $50. And I'm thinking, let's see. I'm not sure when to make the cutoff date. I usually like to give you at least 3 or 4 days warning. Let's go ahead and make the cutoff day Monday. I think that's reasonable. Yeah. Let's make the cutoff day Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific. At that time, I will go consult the total list of folks that have signed up for participating in the survey and therefore getting their names entered into the drawing for that $50 gift card. As I've mentioned, 5 people have already won. That's $250 given out. And we will pull another one next week on Monday, which will be, let's see, today is the 1st. So that would make it on the 6th. So on March 6th, 2017, we will do the drawing for the $50 gift card. Get in there, click that button, and you will be in the running. And good luck to those of you who jump over and get your name in the hat. And congratulations to the other 5 listeners who've already won. It's another day of several different pieces of data, some interesting things. I'm finding more and more, and I'm not real sure what to think of it. I'm finding a lot of different things that seem to relate to one another. And I guess I'll start with these shameless congratulations to me for being right story. For those of you who've been listening for a while, you know that I have been warning that one of the things that will happen first will be the softening of the luxury market. The luxury market will get hit, and that people who are in that segment of the marketplace should seriously think about taking advantage of that now. And when we were talking about this, I think we were talking about this not quite a year ago, almost a year ago, and I know I mentioned it again in November. So we've talked about it quite a few times in relation to trying to give you a little look over the horizon on where things were going to suffer. And it related to a whole bunch of different things. It related to a drop in foreign investment. It related to that little scandal we came up with about a year ago where there was the overseas investment organizations that were then in buying real estate in places like Miami, and different laws that were being put in place to positively identify people who were anonymously buying in that way. There were a bunch of different stories that all related to this. I don't think that particular story has much to do with this, to be honest, at this point. But with all the other stuff that's going on, I think this is an interesting stat. Luxury sellers aren't going to like this, is the title of the story from Realtor.org. And it's setting the stage. The Wall Street Journal is actually the one reporting this. They're reporting on that. But this is a nice little synopsis of that story. And since the Wall Street Journal has a pay gate to get access to their stories, I wanted to give you something there. You didn't have to pay to get sort of the meat of the story. So I went ahead and went with this one. More high-end home sellers across the country are being forced to offer discounts as the luxury real estate market shows signs of softening. Again, that's according to a report from the Wall Street Journal. Quote, buyers are very price sensitive. If it's not priced right, it's going to sit until the cows come home. And that's from Donna Olshan, a real estate professional based in Manhattan. Now, we'd already talked about some of the interesting things that are challenging New York, including Manhattan. We talked about, I think it was like a 30%. No, was that Vancouver? I'm sorry, but there was a big old drop in rental rates in Manhattan due to an increase in the number of units that were available. Now, according to this article, it goes on to state real estate pros and sellers in the luxury market are having to adjust their expectations. In the third quarter of 2016, the median asking price for homes in the top 5% of listings reached $1.2 million, an 18% increase from a year ago, according to Realtor.com market data. The actual sales prices in that luxury segment, however, only rose by 3% during that period. Luxury listings are lingering on the market longer than the overall market, too. Luxury listings are taking a median of 131 days to sell, about 4% slower than a year ago. Another quote from who is this guy? I'm guessing this is another real estate guy. The smart sellers today are pricing for now, not 2014. An $88 million apartment went into contract 3 years ago and just sold. Would they get $88 million today? Probably not. So they're talking about not only a softening or a slowing or a reduction in the increase in percentages, they're actually talking about decreases in values, which is what we were talking about here. In order to prep people. Now, they're talking about an $88 million property. Now, clearly, you need to understand what luxury means. In my marketplace, luxury probably doesn't start to happen till you get to about the $4 million mark, probably possibly in the range of 3-point-something million. But above that, it could even be, and I'm thinking some specific areas here, to be super honest. But in other areas, it could be even lower than that. So you need to figure out where you sit in relation to the rest of your marketplace. But with this impact in these primary luxury markets, I don't think that the hit will be as hard in some other marketplaces. I think it's these ones that have been bloated. And so when you see this, right, specific data from New York, you have to start asking yourself the question, is this a localized thing, or is this a more national thing that we can expect to move forward? Meaning, here is the very first example of it. Remember, like when the downturn happened, it really didn't happen everywhere at once. It kind of happened quickly in retrospect. But as it was happening, it was certain areas that tended to get hit hard. And then suddenly it took a dip. It was like you hit a critical mass and then everything went crazy. Interesting to see what this might do. Could this be the first element in that series of dominoes that tends to make the market more challenging in general for folks not shopping in that luxury market? But of course, this is the stratospheric end of luxury. My argument is that it's going to, I think this is also going to play out in the luxury markets that are not the insane luxury markets, right? Now, a luxury condo in Midtown is seeing developer discounts now being offered at 10 to 15% on lower level units priced between $4 million and $12 million. So that's, and I get those are still incredibly insane numbers for an awful lot of folks, but I think that this also plays in, and you have to think about what they're talking about. They're talking about Manhattan here. So that $4 million to $12 million neighborhood in Manhattan, what would be the equivalent in, say, Denver? Well, it's probably not going to be $12 million homes, but it could very easily be $4 million homes. What about Los Angeles? What parts of Los Angeles, right? Beverly Hills probably is going to have no problem reaching the $12, $15, $20 million mark in terms of luxury. So it's really going to depend on where these luxury neighborhoods of yours are in terms of picking what is that range, what equals luxury. But my argument is that this is, I think, a first indicator where this is going to seep down even to the higher end homes, where perhaps you cross over from luxury into just what would probably be categorized below luxury. We're not talking fountains in the front yard, tennis courts, those types of things, but we're talking homes that are at the extreme high end of just short of the luxury market. So I guess what I'm saying is I think that this may be a sign of a softening that's going to seep down into the markets at the lower price points. How far it goes is one thing I'm not 100% sure about, but I'm thinking it's probably going to affect these other echelons of homes that tend to live in places where maybe not the most rare of people can afford, but maybe folks that are high wage earners that maybe don't step into the tens of millions of dollars worth of housing, but will walk into that $2 million house as a possible purchase, that kind of thing. And we'll see how far that goes. It's interesting to note this change. They're also looking at similar changes in places like Miami and some of the other luxury markets we've talked about in the past. Okay. A kind of unfortunate economic number. The GDP came out, and this is the unrevised annual GDP. The annual rate was 1.9, and we couldn't even get a 2%. And healthy GDP is most usually associated with a number between 2 and 3%. You want to be at least 2%. We missed that by a relatively small number. But in general, it's too low. I'd rather see it much closer to 3. If you want to Google it and kind of get an idea of what the opinions are, that's sort of the accepted range, anything from 2, and I think a lot of folks will argue up to 3.5. Too much growth, too high a number about that relating to GDP, and you can often end up with inflation and other things that are not good. So it's a crazy high number is not good. There is a sort of sweet spot for the GDP. In other real estate news today, monthly U.S. home prices gained. U.S. home price gains reach a 2.5-year high. So the prices continue to go nuts. We talk a lot on this show about things that maybe undermine the idea of having a lot of confidence in the market moving forward. Different things that I think represent a big threat. When you see this going on, it really does tend to have the effect of lighting that fire, I think, of folks starting to get worried that there is no longer a wait strategy, at least if you want to do something in the near term. And it makes it very difficult, particularly if you're someone paying rent. That is a ridiculous amount of money, where clearly if you could get yourself into a mortgage, you'd actually be saving money on a month-to-month basis. Now, low inventory and mortgage rates pushed home price gains to a 30-month high in December. I'm not sure how they think. Well, I guess, okay, so they're still, it's so interesting when you read these articles that all come out at the same time, where one tells you that mortgage rates are now making these crazy jumps, and then others sort of refer to them as low, and they are low. The reality is interest rates are low, but low inventory has I think, been the primary reason for price gains, really. The index, which measures all 9 U.S. Census divisions, found that home prices rose 5.8% year over year from November's 5.6% annual gain. The December rise was the highest annual increase since June of 2014, when it rose 6.3%. Not so much sexy stuff. Of the nation's 20 largest cities, 7 reached their all-time highs in December. And a lot of the usual culprits here, we've got Seattle, Portland, Denver, Boston, Charlotte, North Carolina, and San Francisco and Dallas. And for my money, those are areas that I think it makes more sense to avoid than anything else. Don't go where these things have reached their highest ever rates for homes. If you're in those areas and those areas are most convenient for you, you'll want to find the ones where you can get the best deals. You're gonna have to use a lot of the aggressive tactics that we've talked about on this show before, just relating to tracking down those great deals. Sometimes it means not even waiting for homes to come on the market, going and finding addresses where no one is living there. It appears to be vacant, and then reaching out, getting the tax address for the person who owns it, which is likely going to be different. Just if you're looking for a faster way to do that, Oftentimes you will be able to go onto the internet and get mailing lists where you give it a zip code and you ask only for addresses where the physical address of the property is different from the tax mailing address of the person who owns it, the mailing address of the person who owns it. And then send a letter or a note to all of those folks, letting them know that you are an investor looking to purchase a property and you'd love to talk to them about the possibility of doing that. I know investors who use that tactic in very competitive markets, and it works well enough for them. You're likely going to talk to an awful lot of people before you put a deal together. But even if it's one out of 200, that still ends up resulting in you having a pretty good deal for yourself, even if it is hard fought for, right? You have to invest a lot of time in terms of contacting lots of people to potentially reach that point. All right, folks, we're going to cover a little bit more real estate news today. But we're going to take a quick break, so don't go away. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner, broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. There's another little tidbit that I came across the other day. This one is coming to us from Zero Hedge. And it shows an interesting contradiction that I think is worth talking about in terms of trying to understand the mindset of folks, where people are coming from in terms of their expectations. For a lot of what's going to happen in the market, things happen because people believe one thing or another. And what concerns me about this particular story is if we take it in the context of other things we've discussed in terms of the overall debt that folks have taken on, whether we're talking about car loans or student loans. And there's one other thing I want to talk to you about, student loans, which kind of blows me away and is a concern, but we'll get to that in a second. Is all of these things relating to consumer confidence? Now, consumer confidence is up. Confidence surged above the highest analysts' expectations to 114.8, the best since July of 2001. And that's kind of amazing. We've talked about how consumer confidence has definitely ebbed and flowed over time. But this is a surprising one because of other things that are happening right now. Now, let me also give you some of the details because there's some bizarrely not contradictory, but just opinions that are held that seem at odds with what other things we've looked at. So out of those surveyed, those saying business conditions are good declined slightly from 29% to 28.7%, while those saying business conditions are bad also decreased, which is kind of odd, right? Those folks that are saying things are good and bad are both decreasing at the same time. Consumers' assessment of the labor market was mixed. Those stating jobs are plentiful declined only by about less than 1%. Those claiming jobs hard to get also decreased from 21.1 to 20.3. Consumers were more optimistic about the short-term outlook in February. Let's see. The percentage of consumers expecting business conditions to improve over the next 6 months increased from 22.9 to 24. So that was actually a halfway decent increase. But those expecting business conditions to worsen also rose slightly from 10.8 to 11.1, which is weird, right? I mean, things are going in different directions. Like consumers' outlook for the labor market was also moderately more upbeat. The proportion expecting more jobs in the months ahead increased from 19.7% to 20.4%. So a few more people are expecting the job situation to improve for them. Those anticipating fewer jobs declined. That makes sense, right? The percentage of consumers expecting their incomes to increase rose marginally from 18.1 to 18.1 to 18.3%, so very, very small increase, while the proportion expecting a decrease declined from 9.4 to 8.2. So all good, but then that's fine, right? So that lays out sort of in general statistical numbers what folks' expectations are, or what folks perceive about the economy and the outlook to give us sort of an idea of the confidence level. Now, what's odd is if you plot consumer confidence against real wage growth, the two things are going in opposite directions. And I'm sure there's a huge percentage of you that are going, God, Rebel, why are you dwelling on these boring numbers? The reality is this is it. This is the moment, right? This is the payoff moment. And now I'm going to Pinterest this particular graphic, this chart, because it's kind of mind-blowing. You couldn't imagine a more going the opposite directions statistic than this, than consumer confidence versus real wage growth. Literally, consumer confidence just kind of trickles right on up, and real wage growth is just taking a dump. And when you actually look at it compared to past years for wage growth, we are all the way back at like late 2011, early 2012. So, and remember, one is a perception of the world, right? Consumer confidence is a perception measurement. It's not a reality measurement. It's a perception measurement. It's people saying what they think is going to happen, all right? People tend to act on what they think is going to happen. Real wage growth is a number. It's a digit. It's not, I think I make this amount of money. This is the amount of money that comes in. Why am I harping on this? Because we've already talked about in previous shows about this huge amount of debt that folks are taking on. There's a lot of challenges. We saw an increase in the number of defaults, or the first measures of defaults. We've talked about how the Department of Education underreported the number of students who have not made a single $1 repayment of their student loans over the last 8 years since graduating from college. Not a single payment, not one, $0 paid towards their student loan. Remember, they only get 1 year of a grace period once you graduate. You graduate, and then it's expected that a year later after you've graduated, you start making payments. And just shy, like 1% shy, 49% of students simply never started making those payments and didn't do a thing. So there's all this debt that's accumulating. Real wage growth, and remember, what do wages do? Wages facilitate you paying your debts, right? If your consumer confidence is up here, if your confidence in what's coming, in what's going on, and what your job situation is, and how much money you think you're going to make, and your actual wage growth is going the absolute opposite direction, you're going north, it's going south. What ends up happening to an economy where that's the mindset of the participants and the reality of their income? Does it mean that because they're confident they spend more even though they have less, therefore simply building on their debt? Do you see where I'm going with this? This is another item that I think can feed in to the concerns that we've talked about on this show relating to what happens in the months ahead, what happens over the year, 2 years ahead in relation to this large debt thing. Because remember, I wanted to stop talking about mortgages or car loans or other things, because remember we did a show a little while ago where we talked about debt is debt. And once bad things happen, people tend to respond to that debt in the same way in terms of how they prioritize it. So my argument has been, Once we hit things where people freak out and realize they suddenly have a problem with their debt that they need to deal with, the same actions that were taken back in the last downturn relating to debt specific to real estate are going to be similar to the actions that get taken today to mitigate current debt, right? Now, the only exception to that might be if back then the perception was my house is not worth what I owe. Now, we've already established on this show that for folks who've bought within the last year or two, nobody's home is worth what you paid for it. Once you calculated in how much it would cost you to sell it, you'd have to write a check to somebody. If you bought your house in the last year, pretty much no matter where you bought it, and you wanted to try and sell it, if you add in all the costs of selling that home, you'd have to write a check to somebody. Assuming you got one of those low interest rate loans, right? A 3.5% loan or a 0% loan or a 2% loan. Any of those crazy loans we've talked about, those folks, the folks who have been at the forefront of the group that the system seems to want to enable to purchase, right? Those are all folks who would be absolutely underwater. Here's another interesting story. Absolutely fits in with this. And it's kind of mind-blowing because of how it corresponds to the data we just talked about. 50% of student loan holders, people who went to college, got a student loan, 50% of them believe that their student loan will be forgiven. Now, as I've mentioned before, I will have links to all of the stories that are feeding today's show. So feel free to head on over to therebelbroker.com to check those out. Now, this particular story comes to us from Zero Hedge, but like I often like to mention, this isn't a Zero Hedge conclusion. This is actually them quoting a report that was done by Lend EDU, and you can check that one out for yourself. According to a survey of 500 current college students conducted by Lend EDU, apparently 49.8% of America's youth is convinced that the federal government will simply forgive their student loans when they graduate. Call it a nice little taxpayer-funded graduation gift. This is a quote from the Lend EDU story. The U.S. Department of Education says that federal direct student loan borrowers can get off the hook if they enter public service jobs for a specified period of time, agree to teach in an underserved area, die or become permanently disabled, or if the school they attended shuts down while they are enrolled or within 120 days after they leave. The biggest exemption is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, and very few students go into public service. With maybe 14% of the American workforce in a public service job, the actual numbers of those who may qualify for student loan forgiveness or discharge is maybe below 10%. The fact that many students do not understand this means that they may be significantly underestimating the cost of financing a college education. Now, here's why I find this interesting. Now, this is obviously 500 graduating college students who are going to be graduating. But it's interesting that it's 50%, and it so conveniently matches folks who graduated already, who have graduated with tons of debt, who have not made a payment, because I think those folks believe that amount is going to get forgiven. Now imagine next, they discover that's not going to happen. Someone comes knocking on the door and says, you really need to start making payments on this thing. What happens then? Is that the equivalent of they discover that their home is not worth what they paid for it or what they currently owe on it? Is that the thing that causes that financial panic moment? And what do you do in that moment? Do you do the same things you did last time? If you suddenly know you've got all this debt and you have to get out from under it, and you discover you're not going to get that student loan forgiven, what do you do? Well, if you own a home in today's market and you've seen it go up, so let's pretend folks who maybe did this a few years ago, or maybe they're in an area where they really need to just get out from under the payments. If they're in certain areas here, their monthly payments would be ridiculous. And they see as one of the only ways to solve this problem to sell the property, take out whatever money they can, and find less expensive accommodations. Maybe one of those apartments we talked about that are getting built, right? So it could absolutely fuel what we've talked about as an anticipated trend, a willingness to migrate back into, a return to one of two things, either living with a relative, going back to mom and dad's basement, or getting into one of those apartments that are kind of flooding the market, that are starting to, and it's going to be interesting to see. We have tons and tons of high density housing in terms of apartment complexes going on in Silicon Valley. I don't know when the one in Mountain View is going to come online, but Mountain View committed to a 30% increase in housing units within the city. Mountain View is sort of at the heart of it. You could live in Mountain View and commute all the way up to San Francisco, all the way down to South San Jose, and be relatively comfortable with that commute, particularly since there's public transit right there, trains and light rail and all that kind of stuff. But in any event, the point is that there's all this high density stuff that's planned that could clearly draw in people who found themselves overextended. So what happens when suddenly more houses come on the market? Well, it would certainly solve the inventory problem. But since an awful lot of folks might be in this particular boat of being challenged in terms of their debt, because remember, it's not just student loans. We've got automobile debt. We've got all these other things. And a decent percentage of these folks could absolutely tip a market one direction or another. Well, suddenly you could have a situation where a lot more homes go on the market and you increase the supply dramatically. What happens? You start to see a drop in prices. It could absolutely throw an element of chaos into the market, depending on how the public manages a potential debt problem. But what's most interesting about the data we've covered today is they don't perceive they have a debt problem. The consumer confidence numbers indicate everybody thinks everything's great. They're not concerned. Even on the income side, they're not concerned. And that should be what we're worried about. We should be worried about the fact that there's this huge disconnect between real wages and expectations and how much debt is being covered by folks, because that's the kind of stuff that can cause a lot of havoc in a financial system. Okay. Nothing like happy news here for this Wednesday. As I mentioned, I went ahead and posted that chart that shows off the consumer confidence versus real wage growth. I think it's a mind blower, so check that out. You can find it over at Pinterest. If you'd like to find out if you go to Pinterest and search on Rebel Broker, pretty sure you're going to find me easily. If not, head on over to therebelbroker.com. There's a link to my Pinterest page on the little palette on the right, so feel free to check that out. As always, folks, it's my number one goal to give you more value in the show than you feel like you've invested in terms of the time you've spent listening. So I hope we've managed to give you some interesting things to think about. Maybe you've gotten some new insights here that are going to help you really figure out your local marketplace. Or maybe this has flipped the switch for you and you've decided, the market's going to be in danger in short order, and maybe I need to be making backup plans in case it does. At the very least, I hope that's your takeaway, that you should have a plan. If bad things like this happen, have a strategy to deal with it so that you can maintain your investments and continue to have them be positive cash flow for you. Thanks again for listening, everybody. I'll talk to y'all next time.